Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Capital Budget Subcommittee decision. We're going to go ahead and get started, and these sheets are being available for the public inside this committee room.
Yeah, the audio is, he's on, but the audio isn't coming through. Is the volume low? Just say testing.
Test, test.
There you go.
Okay, great.
That's better.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Capital Budget Subcommittee decision. We're going to go get started. We're going to have DLS go through each of the pages, and then as staff is passing out the sheets, if we could just keep it pretty quiet in the room so we could go through this pretty efficiently. Thank you very much, Department of Legislative Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. You have 5 packets in front of you. The main one is the decision document. The second is the additional pages, which should be the yellow page in front of you. And we have 3 tally sheets that we will go after once we finish all the recommendations in the decision document and the additional pages. We will go budget code wise, starting with PSC.
On page 1 of the white decision document, the 2 actions are related. This is for public school construction. The 2 actions are related. The first action reduces funding for the Healthy School Facility Fund by $45 million so that remaining funds can be utilized in fiscal 27 to extend the program. The second action is that action for the extension with a pre-authorization for the 2026 session for the same program intended to replace the $45 million in GO bonds. And the agency disagreed for both actions.
Motion to reject on the first action, and I think there's an additional page.
Yes, there's an additional page. This is page 1 of your yellow packet. This action is for the Supplemental Capital Grant Program, modifying language for local cost share match.
Motion to adopt the additional page. And for number 2, motion to reject.
On the next page, we have Department of Disabilities. DLS's recommendation was to approve the general obligation bond authorizations for the Access Maryland program. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 4 for Historic St. Mary's City Commission, DLS recommended requesting a report on site improvements, encumbrances, and expenditures, and the agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 5 for the Board of Public Works, the recommended action was to approve all general obligation bond authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendments to prior authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 6 for the judiciary, the first action is to reduce funds for the new Supreme Court of Maryland building based on a revised schedule. It's a reduction of $25 million this year. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Action number 2, also on page 6, continuing on to page 7, increases the pre-authorization for next year for the same project, the new Supreme Court of Maryland building. It's a $30 million increase, brings to $111.4 million.
I say motion to adopt, but I also see there's additional page.
Yep. We have 2 additional pages in your goldenrod packet, or yellow, as some might also say. Page number 2. This is an action to extend the termination date for general obligation bond funds authorized in 2016 for the Catonsville District Court.
Motion to adopt.
Great, thank you. Next item.
Okay. Page 3 in that same packet is for the same project, the new Catonsville District Court, extending the termination date for funds from 2017.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you. Next item.
On page 8 is the military department. DLS's recommendation was to approve all GO bond authorization and pre-authorization. The agency concurred. However, we do have an additional page on page 4 of the packet. This action adds an authorization of about $750,000 to begin the design for the new Joint Forces Headquarters.
Motion to reject the DLS recommendation and adopt the additional page.
Thank you.
On page 9 of your decision document is the Department of Veterans and Military Families. DLS's recommendation was to approve the general obligation bonds for the Crownsville Veterans Cemetery expansion. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 10 in the Department of Planning, DLS recommendation was to approve all authorizations and amendments to prior authorizations, and the agency concurred. However, there is an additional page for your consideration. If you turn to page 5 of your additional page packet, this action adds language extending the termination date for GO bond funds authorized in the 2018 session for the Patterson Center.
Motion to reject the DLS recommendation and adopt the additional page.
On page 11 of your decision document, Department of Information Technology, DLS's recommendation was to approve general obligation bonds to continue construction of the MD First project. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Page 12 of the decision document for the Maryland Department of Transportation, their recommendation was to approve all authorizations. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 13 is the Department of Natural Resources. DLS's recommendation was to approve all authorizations of proposed pre-authorization for the Department of Natural Resources. Agency concurred. However, there is a color page for your consideration. It's on the page 6 of the Black Eyed Susan pages. This is the Waterway Improvement Fund funding for the Summers Cove Marina Bulkhead Replacement and Facility Improvements Project. It's be a fiscal 2027 pre-authorization for that purpose.
Motion to reject the DLS recommendation and adopt the additional page.
On page 14 of the decision document, in the Maryland Department of Health, DLS recommends approving all authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendments to prior authorizations for the Maryland Department of Health, and the agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 15 of the white packet, the DLS recommendation for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services was to approve all authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendments to prior authorizations. The agency concurred, but there are 3 additional pages in the yellow packet for your consideration, beginning on page 7. The first additional item adds $1 million in fiscal 26 to begin construction of the new Life Skills and Reentry Center for Women.
Motion to reject the original DLS recommendation and adopt the first additional page.
Page 8 of the yellow packet is an item for the Baltimore Therapeutic Treatment Center. The action reduces fiscal 26 funding by $46 million to provide the funds necessary to start construction in May of 2026.
Motion to adopt.
Related to that same project, on page 9, there's an action that would increase the amount pre-authorized for fiscal 27 by the $46 million for a total of $278 million.
Motion to adopt.
That's it for public safety.
On page 16 of your decision document is the Maryland State Library Agency. DLS's recommendation was to approve the GO bond authorizations. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 17 for the University of Maryland Baltimore campus, the DLS recommendation is to reduce the GO bond funding for the new School of Social Work to replace by $5 million from the CEF fund.
Motion to adopt. And I see there's an additional page.
Yes, on page 10 of your yellow package, or whatever, whichever color you want to call it. This adds language to extend the termination date for the GO bond funds for the Central Electric Substation infrastructure upgrade project.
Motion to adopt.
Moving on to page 18 for University of Maryland College Park, DLS's first recommendation was to defer the $7.5 million in GO funding for the campus-wide infrastructure improvements to fiscal 27. The agency disagreed.
Motion to reject.
The second recommendation was to reduce the GO bond funding for the Zupnik building and to be replaced by a transfer from the CEF fund. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt, and I see there's an additional page.
Yes, if you turn to page 11 in your additional page package, this would add $2.5 million to the new Health and Human Service complex.
Motion to adopt.
On page 19, we have Bowie State University. The DLS recommendation is to approve all authorizations for Bowie State University. The agency concurred in part, requesting an additional $8.5 million.
Motion to adopt.
On page 20 in the white packet, Townsend University, the recommendation is to reduce GO bonds by $9 million for the Green Energy Initiative. The recommendation is to fund the $9 million through the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and the agency concurs.
Motion to adopt. I see the additional page.
Okay, yes, in the yellow packet, page 12, the first item was just discussed. So the next item, second item, which is on page 12 and 13, there's an additional action to provide $300,000 for Cook Library renovations.
Motion to adopt.
Okay. Back in the white packet, page 21, Salisbury University, the recommendation is to approve our GO bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurs.
Motion to reject the DLS recommendation. Go to the additional page.
Okay. Yes. In the yellow package, page 14, the recommendation for Blackwell Hall renovation is to reduce GO bonds by $5 million so the Strategic Energy Investment Fund can fund the $5 million for the Green Energy Initiative.
Motion to adopt the additional page.
On page 22 of the white packet, we have the University of Maryland Global Campus. The recommendation was to approve all changes to prior authorizations for the University of Maryland Global Campus. No response from the agency.
Motion to reject the DLS recommendation. I know there's an additional page.
There is not for Global Campus.
Oh, sorry, I skipped to motion to adopt.
Restate the item again.
On page 22 of the white packet, University of Maryland Global Campus. To approve all changes to prior authorizations for the University of Maryland Global Campus.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you. Next item.
Okay, on page 23 for UMBC, the DLS recommendation was to approve the authorization and pre-authorizations. However, I have some additional items for you to consider on page 15 of your additional package. This action will provide funds for a new synthetic track surface.
Motion to reject the DLS recommendation and adopt the additional page.
And then turning to page 16, this would add funds to begin design of the new student services building.
Motion to adopt.
Sorry.
USM.
I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry. Page 24 for System Office. This is to approve the general bond authorization, pre-authorization, and approve all academic revenue bonds.
Motion to adopt.
On page 25, for the Baltimore City Community College, recommendation 1 deletes funds for property acquisition. This deletion is associated with applying Baltimore City Community College's fund balance to acquire unidentified properties. The agency disagreed.
Motion to adopt.
Recommendation 2 authorizes $9 million in general obligation bonds for deferred maintenance projects. The agency concurred with the recommendation.
Motion to adopt.
On page 26 for Maryland School for the Deaf, DLS recommendation is to approve all general bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 27, for the Maryland Higher Education Commission, DLS recommendation was to approve all authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 28, Morgan State University, this item reduces the GO funding by $9 million to be replaced with special funds from the C fund, and the agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 29 of the decision document in the University of Maryland Medical System, DLS recommended approving all authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
On page 30 for the Department of Housing and Community Development, DLS recommended funding the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative at the mandated level. The agency disagreed.
Modify the DLS recommendation to fund the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative at $18 million. I also see there's an additional page.
Yes, this is on page 17 of the yellow packet. This recommendation increases the funding for the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund and restricts general obligation bond funding for specified projects.
Adopt the additional page to fund NED at 18 million and restrict 4 million within NED for 2 projects.
Moving back to the decision document, the second recommendation eliminates funding for the Business Facade Improvement Program, as other programs within the Division of Neighborhood Revitalization have capacity to award grants. The agency disagreed.
Motion to reject.
Moving to page 31 for the third recommendation. This recommendation directs DHCD to use $5 million from the C Community Development Anchor Institution Fund to fund the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore Strategic Operations Center. The agency disagreed.
Motion to modify the DLS recommendation to restrict an additional 2.5 million for IonQ headquarters.
Thank you. Next item.
That recommendation is on page 18 of the additional packet.
So on the additional packet, all right, motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt. Thank you. Next item.
On page 32 in the Department of...
I still have a few more additional pages. On page 19 for the Department of Housing and Community Development, this action restricts general obligation bond funding in the Strategic Demolition Fund for specified projects.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you. Next.
On page 20, this action reduces funds for the Partnership Rental Housing Program to reallocate to the Housing Innovation Fund.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
On page 21, this action restricts funds in the rental housing programs for a specified project.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
On page 22, this action provides funds for the Housing Innovation Fund.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
Back in your decision document on page 32, DLS recommendation for the Department of Commerce is to approve the bond authorization, and the agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you. Next item.
On page 33, the Maryland Department of the Environment, DLS recommended approving all authorizations. The agency concurred in the first house of that.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
On page 34 for the Maryland Environmental Service, recommendation was to approve all authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
The Department of Juvenile Services appears on page 35. DLS recommended approving the authorization and the deauthorization for the department. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
The Department of State Police appears on the next page, page 36. DLS recommended approving all authorizations, deauthorizations, and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
On page 37, we have the start of the miscellaneous grants program. Item number 1 is DLS recommendation to reduce $2.5 million for the Adventist Health New Fort Washington facility. The grantee disagreed.
Motion to reject.
Next item.
Item number 2 is DLS recommendation to reduce $1.5 million in GO bonds for the Baltimore Museum of Art, Fire Suppression, Capital Improvements. Grantee disagreed.
Motion to reject.
Next item.
Item number 3 is DLS recommendation to reduce $2.1 million in GO bonds for the Bowie Mill Bike Trail. Grantee disagreed.
Motion to reject.
Next item.
On page 38, item number 4 is a DLS recommendation to reduce $5 million in GO bonds for the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore Strategic Operations Center. I would note that a few minutes ago in, I believe it was DHCD, there was $5 million for this project.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
Item number 5 is the DLS recommendation to reduce $1.5 million in GO bonds for the Glen Echo Park Spanish Ballroom renovation. Grantee disagreed.
Motion to reject.
Next item.
Item number 6 is a DLS recommendation to reduce $2.5 million in GO bonds for the Port Discovery Children's Museum. Grantee disagreed.
As I look at Delegate Metzger, motion to reject.
Item number 7 on page 39 is a recommendation to reduce $1.5 million in GO bonds for the Salisbury Regional Airport new hangar project. The grantee disagreed.
Motion to reject.
Next item.
Actually, I just realized I made a small mistake here. That should be a $750,000 reduction for the Salisbury Regional Airport. My apologies.
Still a motion to reject.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Item number 8 is a recommendation to reduce $1 million in GO bonds for the Westport Capital Development Clement Street relocation.
Motion to reject.
Item number 9 is for the Maryland Independent College and University Association. The recommendation was to approve all authorizations. The agency concurs, but also requests an additional $3.96 million.
Motion to adopt.
Beginning on page 40, so pages 40 to 43 is for the Maryland Hospital Association. DLS recommendations 1 through 12 are all to delete funding for projects with the state funding percentage less than 15%. The agency disagrees.
Motion to reject all 12.
Motion to reject all 12. Next item.
That is the end of our decision document and the additional pages. We have 3 tally sheets in front of you. We will go through each one of them. The green one, if you would refer to, this is the miscellaneous grant projects. This tally sheet includes governor's miscellaneous projects, changes to it, and also the new miscellaneous projects for your consideration.
If we could, as a committee, take a look at this for a little bit. Okay, hope everybody had a time to take a look at that list. Is there a motion on the miscellaneous grant project? Okay, next sheet.
Okay, the blue.
Sorry, if we could go back to the green sheet, sorry, excuse me.
Yes.
Go back to the green sheet one more time.
Making sure ready, there we go. So colleagues, I want to pull out 1 and make a motion that we swap the funds for the St. Vincent project for funding the Society of the Sons of the American Revolution.
Okay, that's a motion.
Any second?
Second, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
Thank you. The blue page is the local bond initiatives tally sheet for your consideration.
Thank you. If we could take a moment to look at that. Okay, Mr. Vice Chair.
Motion to adopt the LBIs.
Okay, the motion to is adopt the LBIs. Okay, next item.
Thank you. The last tally sheet, the orange or salmon, I don't know. This is the general obligation bond pre-authorization tally sheet that pre-authorizes $10 million for the Luminous Health Doctors Community Medical Center for your consideration.
Motion to adopt.
Next item.
And that is all for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Subcommittee, for all your work, and thank you for Department of Legislative Services for all the work that they've done. Is there a motion on the decisions?
Move the decisions.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. That concludes today's Capital Budget Subcommittee decisions.